Welcome to the Challenge Center. We do a lot of neat things here. We just had a group from Hot Springs, North Carolina in this morning to do the mission. They came very early. They came last night into town and did some stuff downtown. Came here first thing this morning. They're having lunch at the UC, and then they're going to go downtown and do another event, and they're going to go back to Hot Springs. So I'm going to look on the map and see where Hot Springs, North Carolina is. But we do a lot of different programs here. We do a lot of retreats and for other organizations. We just did a retreat just recently for the Betsy Smith Executive Board. So if you have boards that you like to bring in to do meetings or other things of that nature, please come to the Challenger Center. Last year we served almost 8,500 people that came through the program. So we really do appreciate you being here. Other thing is that if you have children, birthday parties, we do birthday parties, we have summer camps coming up and other things, so shameless promotion for the challengers. So welcome.
Restrooms are right behind that wall. You can go out that door or that door and just go around whenever you need to. I am delighted to see you. This is the 10th one of these that we have held over the past 3 years. And what we're trying to do is work with the community of Chattanooga to learn. All of us learn together as a community. And it's been a lot of fun and very enlightening. We've learned things we like, and we've learned things we're not so sure about. And today, the topic is one that we've really struggled with. I received a contract from the Kettering Foundation a few years back to study Chattanooga. Kettering Foundation in Ohio was interested in why Chattanooga had been so successful when it had been such a mess. You know, in 1969 we were declared the dirtiest city in America. Today we're one of the hottest spots to go to in America. That's not a very long period of time. So what is it about Chattanooga? So they gave us a small research grant to ask that question of people, not in the traditional research sense, but go around asking people over lunch, over dinner, or across the hall, or down the street, why do you live in Chattanooga? What about this place keeps you here? The Kettering question was, what's with Chattanooga anyway? And then I got acquainted with Mike Harrell, who's sitting right here, and he was a newcomer to Chattanooga, relatively, and he was asking the same question. What is it about this city that makes it tick? So we've started to ask, and the more we ask, the more I start to say confused, but I'm not sure it's confused as excited. There are many answers. So we continue to ask that question. But what we concluded early on was there are values that exist here. What are they? Every organization, every community, every country has a set of basic core values. And those core values drive everything that happens in that organization or city or country. So we are just exploring, and we've asked you to join us in this conversation to explore what those values are. We've looked at it from several different directions, and today we're looking at it from yet a different direction. And Michael Gilliland, a gentleman I met just a few months ago, and I got talking about this, and he's the most excited person that I've run into over lunch, if you haven't ever experienced this. He is a bottomless pit of information about Chattanooga. So I asked him, would you like to assemble a group here and have this discussion further? And he said yes. So here we go. Michael is a lifelong resident of Chattanooga. Chairman of the board of Chattanooga Organized for Action. Now that sounds like where we want to be. So I would like to introduce you for the short period before we actually do lunch. Michael Gilliland. I'm sorry. My grad assistants are always keeping me on task. You have in front of you a 3x5 car. And that's assignment 1. Thank you, Ashley. Ashley Reeder, Ashley Jackson, and Christina Bellino, my grad assistants that keep everything running. I just love them. So that 3x5 card, if you would take a minute, write a question on there. You can write more than one if you want to, but the question that you come here with, we don't care what it is. What question do you have about Chattanooga values? Just any question. Give you about a minute and leave it on the table. Okay. Now I give you Michael Dillon.
That introduction was serious. Michael Dillon. Can I turn this on?
Yes.
Well, I'm excited to be here. Thank you all for having me. Just a little bit more about myself. I am a born and bred Chattanoogan. Grew up in Hickson and Red Bank. Moved to East Brainerd, and now I live in the wonderful community of Orchard Knob. Couldn't pick a better place. Yeah. Our organization is a little bit different. We are a community organizing nonprofit focused on social justice issues in the city, and we work with a diverse number of groups. My hope and desire, maybe we can turn the lights on. In talking about something as broad and perhaps as ephemeral as Chattanooga values is to perhaps provide a counterpoint with the type of work that we do and the people that we're involved with. I think it's very clear that depending on what area of town you grow in, what class you happen to be, what race you happen to be, your perceptions of the values that drive Chattanooga are going to be profoundly different. So I want to talk first about what we might consider to be driving Chattanooga right now. Can we talk about? I think more than anything else that Chattanooga is in the age of the Renaissance. Okay, that the values that determine what's happening in the city are those of urban renewal and regrowth. Everything that's talked about for Chattanooga being on an upswing has to do with the urban revitalization. And there are some pretty impressive responses coming from this. We are one of a few cities that was able to go from a precipitous decline in population to all of a sudden growing exponentially. We have a huge increase in amount of investment in downtown that can't be denied. Vacant buildings that were set to collapse are now being renovated and restored. Last year we were highlighted as being the 4th best city in the country to start a business in. This year we were already highlighted as being the 2nd best city for women-owned businesses. So there's movement. You can see right here this early picture right before, at the beginning of the Renaissance, what the riverfront looked like. I know that's kind of hard to see today, but everyone knows. We know what the riverfront and what downtown development looks like. But I do believe very strongly that there are two Chattanoogas. There's Chattanooga that is experienced very differently. So it's so hard to talk about values because it has to do so much with personal values, with what your own experiences are. And I think for all of us, in order to engage in a better discussion, it would be good to talk about some concretes, about the social reality in Chattanooga, to talk about what's driving us. And more than anything else, I want to talk about class. So just in 2014, New York Times did a really interesting story about the level of poverty in Chattanooga. Enough poverty to catch the New York Times' attention. It said that the poverty rate is 27%, and that's nearly double the national average. Out of that, women had 2/3 of the city's poor households, and 42% of its children are poor, nearly double the rate statewide. Now, this seems strange in comparison with all the glowing reviews of the Renaissance that we have. Chattanooga ranks 12th in the nation in terms of economic inequality. out of the top 100 markets. So this is the metropolitan statistical area. For every one household that makes 200,000, there are going to be 20 that earn less than 50,000. For every one household that earns 200,000, there are 10 that make below 20,000 a year. So this is not just something that the Renaissance hasn't been able to fix yet, okay? Poverty in Chattanooga has actually grown exponentially. The Brookings Institute did a study that took census data between 2000 and 2010, showed that there was a 75.2% increase in poverty in the urban core and a 52% increase in the suburban Chattanooga. These aren't the kind of statistics that most people talk about when talk about the best time ever, but they are real nevertheless. Just between 2007 and 2009, we had the second highest rise in poverty levels of any city in the country outside of Allentown, Pennsylvania. Okay. Now the question becomes, or is begging, what is driving that? What is it about our social situation? And what I would say about the values that drive our social situation, that this is occurring at the same time that we're growing in both investment, infrastructure, and urban renewal. Hamilton County is ranked very bad in terms of income mobility for children of poor families. So Hamilton County is only better than 9% of all other counties, according to a study that's cited by the New York Times last year. So I wanted to show everybody this. This is kids born in poverty in Chattanooga. Everyone below the age of 19, according to census data from 2014. So the numbers are pretty high. The darkest blue there is 51% of children up to 100%. So in some areas, such as in the community, the census tract of Ridgedale, 70% of children are growing up in poverty. Okay, in places like South Red Bank, that number is about 40%, 43%. But these are pretty stark. To talk about income and to talk about poverty in Chattanooga is also to talk about housing. And that Chattanooga is facing an affordable housing crisis, particularly for the bottom half of the population. So right now, half of all renters and half of mortgage holders are burdened by housing costs according to HUD standards. Okay, 25% are severely burdened, meaning that they're spending more than 50% of their income just on housing. That is pretty stark, and that is only increasing. Now, all of this necessarily can't be tied to the Renaissance, but I'll tell you what can. Chattanooga currently maintains the 7th quickest rising rents in the nation, and those rents are reverberating all the way to the poorest communities in town. So those rents are increasing. If you see that map for poverty, that poverty specifically, a huge amount of that is concentrated in the urban core, exactly where the revitalization is taking place. So the amount of displacement that's happening has been pretty extreme. It's been so extreme that Thomas Fordham Institute has noted that between 2000 and 2010, Chattanooga has 2 of the top 25 zip codes for racially based gentrification or racial displacement. So the area around the south side, 37408, was actually the #1 zip code in the country for racial displacement and change. 37403, which is the area around MLK, all the way leading up towards Lincoln Park and Erlanger, it was number 12, I believe, in the country. So this revitalization that does occur in Chattanooga isn't falling on everybody equally. There is a group that is receiving benefits and that is able to take advantage of all the benefits of Chattanooga. Then there is another group that perhaps has to suffer more of the burden. Okay? So, Chattanooga. You can't talk about Chattanooga without talking about the low-wage economy because we live in a low-wage state, right? Chattanooga, Tennessee has the highest percentage of minimum wage workers in the country. And even among that, Chattanooga is an outlier compared to other major metropolitan areas such as Knoxville or Nashville or Memphis. Okay, so Wallet Hub recently, which is an information gathering site, highlighted Chattanooga as having the 7th lowest pay for somebody with a bachelor's degree. And I think that if you look at Chattanooga history, low pay has been a very contentious issue, and dating back very far, back to the time after the Civil War, I would say. This issue is constantly being recurring, and it led to Chattanooga being a labor union center throughout the 30s, throughout the 60s and 70s. So it's pretty big. It's not just about lowest pay, though, for someone with a bachelor's degree. When we think about Chattanooga values, I can't help but think about Volkswagen and all of the praise that's lauded on us for being able to get Volkswagen. And $800 million in subsidies in order to get them to move here, that's a big amount. The one thing that doesn't get talked about as much is that Volkswagen right now pays the lowest of any auto manufacturer in the United States. And to this day, or at least as was reported last year, they've been open for 5 years. A third of their workforce is still temp workers. So the question of public subsidy and where it goes and who benefits is one that should be questioned. You can take Amazon as well, $300 million in public subsidies, and by far the majority of their work is done through temp work at what is relatively low pay. So we can talk about transit, okay? Chattanooga doesn't rank very highly on public transportation. So according to a 2011 Brookings Institute report, Chattanooga ranks 87 out of the top 100 metro areas that combine coverage and access rankings, the centers of employment and jobs. Only 23% of all working age Chattanooga residents live near a transit stop. The average for the top 100 metro areas is 69%. That's a pretty stark difference. Other reports show that public transportation is very divided by class. That in Chattanooga, 3 out of 4 people that use public transportation in this city have no other means of conveyance. So that's a pretty strong division. We can talk about health because Chattanooga is lauded nationally as being the outdoor city. That all of the examples, the sports events, the marathons that go through, Chattanooga is typically assumed or understood to be a city of health. In actuality, in April of 2014, we were highlighted in USA Today as the 8th worst in health in the country. That's a pretty low ranking. There's a lot of reasons for that, no doubt. Food deserts, lack of access to healthy food. But I think a lot of it has to do with lifestyle. And the lifestyle that's created by the fact that we are in the top rankings for sprawl in the country. And just so everyone knows, every major Tennessee city is in the top 10 for urban sprawl in the country. That's a pretty strong value that's pressed. And that has, urban sprawl has been shown to have a number of non-beneficial effects to health. Access, the type of lifestyle that people are living, whether they're able to walk to work, walk to their nearest convenience, or having to get in a car to go basically everywhere. It has an effect. So I bring all of these things up just to provide a counterpoint. When we think about what are the values that drive Chattanooga, we should think about what are the values that have created the city that we live in, the city that exists, and a city that is, from the statistics and from the information, one that's very divided, that has very differential experience based off of class, based off of race. The average income for a black family in Chattanooga is less than half of the average income overall in Hamilton County. It's pretty historic. And I didn't include education largely because this is a big, I want to provide time for you all to talk, also because the numbers are so bad. And it's, again, very strongly based on class. And it's very hard to overcome these class barriers of children that are living in poverty through education alone. I think when we talk, and our goal here is to have a conversation, what are the strongest values that create the city? And what values have had the greatest effect? What is driving Chattanooga? And should the values that exist now be the ones that we hold up, continue to keep? Sometimes the strongest values aren't just the ones that people are willing to die for, the ones that individually you might hold so well. Sometimes the strongest values are the ones that are just powerful socially, and the ones that so often go unchallenged. For me, as a working class kid growing up in Chattanooga, I think there is a lot about the values that exist in Chattanooga that could go for some renovation and some change. So I think that'll be it.
Okay. If you were disturbed by any of those data, that was intended.
Could we ask a question about the data before we, because I did have a point on the
Okay,
data,
go
Michael.
ahead. Sure.
Yeah, on the gentrification piece, I understand in general, I think we can make a general assumption or statement that there has been gentrification, but I think that that data is skewed by the south side. There was no housing when it was gentrified. So if you only had 10 legacy, what I call legacy families, I'm from C&E, by the way, who developed the south side. If you only had 10 or 15 people still living there who were African American, and then you have 100 housing units built, that's going to skew those gentrification numbers so that you're in the top 1% or whatever. So I don't disagree with the premise that there are neighborhoods that have gentrified, but we have to remember MLK also, a lot of the housing had already been removed and people weren't living there. So I don't think the gentrification is the percentages when you look at some of the data. It's still happening,
Compared
but
to
it's
major
not.
cities such as,
Yeah.
yeah, sorry.
Well, I differ with that, because the south side has been redefined. When you look at the south side and what's being called the south side today, it's around Main Street. But the real south side started once you cross 24, where Howard and Paul's homes are located. You know, we call that the real south side, because that's the area where the poorest people live. That's the area that you should change that 08 to 10, the 37410, which is that zip code. So Chattanooga values have redefined what the south side is. And the south side today is not the real south side
All right.
of yesterday.
I love this, but that's what we're supposed to end with. And to start that, we need to eat. And we need to eat around a discussion, and so what happens now is lunch. And I love the way it's developing, the conversation. There will be an assignment 2 over lunch, and you will receive a sheet, each of you will receive, or each table receives a sheet of paper that has 2 parts to the assignment. At your table, you need to identify a recorder and reporter. It can be the same person or it can be a different person. But the recorder puts on the sheet that you're going to receive the substance of your discussion around 3 questions, which will be listed for you. Then you will discuss the 3 questions and record the main points on that sheet of paper that you'll receive. So you identify a recorder and then a reporter. And the reporter then will speak for your table at the panel at the end, and that's when everybody gets into it, just like we almost did just now. And that's wonderful. Okay, any questions? All right, it's lunchtime. Let me tell you where all this data is going to go. What we do is we take the data off of these. You're supposed to leave those with us when you get through. And we take this data and analyze it by theme, along with your original questions, and then we have one more assignment just before you leave, your last assignment before you go out the door. We accumulate all of that, and we're putting together that with the the videotape as a report for each of the learning lunches on a website. And that's being constructed as we speak, and it will be available after the fact. But you will receive by email a summary report of the theme analysis very soon. So all of this accumulated data that we have, and hopefully most of it written down, we will provide as feedback to each of you. At this point, the 6 of you are representing the combined discussion of the group that you represent. And we'll go through the 3 questions, and I'll just stand back here in the corner and moderate. But anyone in the audience should feel free to ask a question or to not interrupt so much as ask for clarification or add to. If your reporter is as complete as you feel that they should be, then add to, and we'll see where it goes. And we'll go through the questions one at a time, beginning with, might as well start with the left here, and address the first question. What primary values define Chattanooga according to your group?
Okay, so we came up kind of with kind of 4, and the values kind of come with kind of 2 different sides, right? So the first value that we talked about in our group, inside I should say, I'm Michael Walton, I'm the executive director of Green Spaces.
Excuse me, Michael. That's a good. I apologize. I'm surprised one of my grad assistants didn't yell at me again. Let's go through just go name who you are and real quick, and then I'll come back to you.
Okay, I'm Mike. Oh, you got me.
I'm Andrea Bexford. I teach history at GPS.
I'm Bob Leopold, and I'm missioner at Southside Abbey.
I'm Christy Wilkinson. I'm a full-time civic volunteer and a stay-at-home mom.
I'm Sam Fulbright. I'm the Empower Chattanooga Program Coordinator at Green Spaces.
I'm DeMarcus Boyce. I'm a full-time student and the case manager at Big Brothers Big Sisters.
Thank you. All right. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So the first value that we talked about was generosity, and so that's kind of in terms of foundations that we all know and love. But that generosity is generally focused on giving fish rather than teaching people to fish. To kind of borrow the proverb. We've talked about entrepreneurship as kind of a core value in Chattanooga, and that actually goes back to why that generosity exists in terms of Coca-Cola bottling and some of those things. But again, those are for the people that have access and know that those institutions exist to support entrepreneurship. And then we also talked about open communication, this event being a good example of that. But again, that goes back to, for those that know that those channels exist and are open. And then the fourth one that we think is kind of goes across those, that is a value that maybe we're not as proud of, are the silos that exist in Chattanooga, both physically in terms of the communities where people live, work, and go to school, but also in society, where people work in these silos, and we even see that in the generosity. So the nonprofits that work in silos and focused on their exclusive mission, in some ways out of competition for that generosity. So those are the ones that we came up with.
Thank you. So our group went a little rogue, which I think is often a good thing. So we actually got stuck. We kind of started this discussion and got stuck on thinking about education. And what it came down to was we were having a hard time distinguishing between claimed values and actual values. We started getting lost in what we think Chattanooga may claim as a value ideologically, but what they were actually willing to go out and do were 2 different things. And so in that distinction, we started just discussing that. And our example of education was one that we were talking about because, what was it, the Create Here survey 4 years ago, was it? 4 years ago. The survey revealed that the #1 concern for people in Chattanooga and the county was education, and yet looking only in the last year, the county voted not to accept a tax increase to support education. So once again, we're seeing this distinction between claimed values and then willing to actually do action. So what we started exploring as a group is, what do we think some of these claimed values might be, and how are they actually actionable? And the discussion was, to give you some background, is we're all kind of involved at my table in education in one way or another, whether it's in the business sector, nonprofit, or in my case, private education. And I actually came from UTC before this, so public education as well. It is thinking about education, and one thing that I, as a historian who specializes in the late 19th and 20th century, thinks about a lot is the question of how do systems preserve themselves over time? Why is it that empowered groups claim and continue to hold power? And what we were looking at is the question of cultural hegemony. And hegemony is a concept in which you look at something like, think about ancient Rome. How is it possible that one tiny city actually maintained control over the entire Mediterranean, when any kind of massive uprising from even a small section would have managed to disempower Rome from that control? And what the Roman Empire did so successfully is they managed to convince non-Romans that they, A, wanted to be Romans, and not only did they share the same values as Romans, but they actually wanted to be a Roman themselves. And so these other people took on Roman values. And this meant that the Romans themselves didn't actually have to control them, because they were in fact now Romans. This is the workings of hegemony. So one of the things we as a group thought we would like to look at is, how is it that you can convince people, or how is it that Chattanooga convinces people who are not being advantaged by certain goals to accept them as goals even when those are not actually changing? So, I think, did I cover that well for my group?
I don't think you went so rogue. I think you're going to hear a lot of that.
Excellent.
Sort of stuff there. Well, we'll start with ancient Rome there. So the Pax Romana. This was an idea of peace through war, right? They would just extend the borders of that empire, and then they'd have this fluffy marshmallow center of peace there. And there was this little Mediterranean Jewish son of a carpenter who came into that and tried his best to overturn that. And so that was one of our values that we came up with, particularly in terms of what is voiced and what is actually lived. In terms of Christianity, we think that that's a dominant sort of cultural value here. However, I, as someone who works in that, well, let's call it arena since we're in Rome. There, I want to. Maybe it's time to don some armor. And okay, so that's one. And then Michael brought up the Renaissance, which I love to say Renaissance. I think it's beautiful to say it that way. But just as that Renaissance harkened back to an earlier time, I think in some ways ours in Chattanooga, this city, has harkened back to an earlier time. And it's maybe not the best time to harken back to. So we actually came up with some values that weren't so great. Greed, that would be one. Segregation, we're calling it segregation 2.0, sort of where it's okay to live in a two-class society. But I think that's dovetailing what you're saying, so maybe not so rogue. And then on top of that, there's value of sort of natural resources, and that could be from like Siskin Steel, taking all the stuff to like, well, I mean, yeah, the air is cleaner now. Ladies' nylons don't melt to their legs when they can go outside anymore. So that's a good thing. And then again, opportunity, but only for those who have access.
So our conversation actually really began with a kind of like discussion about values that are touted as being dominant values versus values that are actually like more seem to be apparent. And I'm always trying to think positive myself, so I was like, oh, Chattanooga is innovative. And then I thought, well, that kind of innovation is just really done in a box. And if we were really innovative, we would find innovative ways to educate our kids, and we'd find innovative ways to solve the poverty problem, and we'd find innovative ways to make sure that everyone has a safe place to live. And so the innovation is sort of limited. I had the benefit of sitting with Michael, who is really a bottomless pit of information. And so we sort of redirected and thought that rugged individualism is really a core value in Chattanooga. And this is one of these things that I think can be looked at from two different perspectives, rugged individualism. You know that a lot of people are very motivated to work hard and do things and try and get ahead. But then it's sort of like once they do make those advancements, it's hard to look back on where you were and remember all the people that lifted you up to get there. So I think it's true that is a dominant value, and that there is evidence of it. The longstanding legacy of segregation, continued low pay, a real question about who benefits from the economic progress that we've made. It's not evenly distributed, but it touches very small, concentrated pockets of our communities. I'm going through all three of these questions. Is that what I'm supposed to do, or just the first one? Okay, I'll
Just
stop.
one, just number one.
Cool. So we also went pretty rogue and pretty far down the education rabbit hole at our table, which sounds like a theme, but I guess really like we didn't actually land on really concrete values, and I guess the most concrete thing we landed on was another question of whose values are we speaking of? And I think that really, to me, is like encompassing what I'm hearing from most everybody is like we definitely agreed that particularly speaking to education, is like almost everyone realizes that we really, really need to work on our public schools. But when the rubber meets the road, we're not actually investing in them. And we're not actually translating those values into meaningful action really in any way. And then we also really spoke a lot about kind of this form of government we have that's really open and really participatory on the face of it. And then you get in and you find that these discussions are actually really kind of like already geared towards a desired outcome that may or may not be what the people in that room are actually all about. And so, I think that was really kind of the big thing that we really tried to tackle was like, whose values exactly are we speaking of? We didn't come to a great answer to that, because that seems to be really divided depending on who is in the room. And then the question is like, do we invest in those values? And we, I think, kind of generally decided that no, we don't particularly do that very well.
Okay.
All right. Well, similar to my colleagues in the other groups, our group looked at what we actually experience here in Chattanooga from the members that are at my table, and we said that faith is really strong here in Chattanooga. Me, myself being an import from Memphis, a land with 1,000 churches, I think that Chattanooga's unique ability to impact the community through faith-based initiatives is really strong here in a way that that's really powerful. It's really important to understanding who we are as a group. So whether you're go to OPC or Orchard Knob or Abba's House, those communities have great influence on how we socialize, how we identify ourselves, how we identify others as being in or out of the group. Next is control and order. With Chattanooga, it has a reputation of being a slow to change city. Chattanooga likes Chattanooga the way Chattanooga is. And even though we tout that change, when it comes down to some of the values and how those things take place, the idea is, the managers live on Signal, the owners live on Lookout, and everybody else is here in the valley. So if you're talking about making change, you have to understand those dynamics here. And that's something that we've kind of experienced when it comes down to who has the power to actually make those changes, who has held the positions to make those changes. And that led us to our third value, is that we're a very cliquish city. And part of that reason that we saw is because there's a sense of fear with those who hold positions, who've held those positions that over the years and over the centuries and however long, that to be more inclusive may mean that I have to give something up. I have to share my power. I may lose my influence, rather than seeing that, you know, a rising tide lifts all ships. And that's something that's very, very important when we're talking about changing the dynamic of inclusion and diversity here in Chattanooga.
Thank you. Are there any audience comments or questions or concerns or additions to this response to question number 1?
I'd like to ask one question.
Yeah.
Because one thing that I heard come up about 3 times is, my question is, do you think the public education system is a failure or is it succeeding?
Yes.
That's a question.
Is that to anybody?
Huh?
Was that to anybody?
It was to anybody. I think about
Well,
3
maybe
people about
let me
education.
rephrase that. Does anybody think it's succeeding?
Because I think it's succeeding.
Okay.
I think it's succeeding.
In spite of the private education
No,
system.
I think it's designed to do exactly what it's doing.
Oh, I see that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because schools are a pipeline to prison. And the very first prison that was privatized in all of America was Silverdale in the 80s. And then the public school system was basically 16 public schools, which were primarily in the black community, were closed down shortly after Silverdale opened in '89. And then it was consolidated in '97. But prisons are built on the 3rd grade education level, primarily of black males. So if you have a school system that is succeeding by failing black males, then you continue the system that you have in Chattanooga. You continue filling up prisons that are private corporations that are designed to do exactly what they're doing. So I don't believe money is the answer, because we continue to throw money at it, but we continue to succeed in filling up our prison system.
And I think there's a very important kind of recent news story that came out about that. Was the I don't know how many millions of dollars went to the like 5 lowest performing
They
schools.
each got $1 million.
That's right. They each got $1 million, and the outcomes.
So it is no
Yeah,
coincidence then that
Yeah.
the schools
Yeah,
that
you're
are the
exactly
best
right.
schools are Baylor, Macaulay, GPS, and your private schools where the
Well, I would
majority-
add Signal to that, right? Which
Yeah,
is
because
also-
Signal people got tired of paying the high tuitions at Baylor and GPS, so they wanted a good school up there for them.
And those are allowed. Those are. It's only good because, at least in my opinion, of the extra funding that's provided by the Mountain Education Foundation, right? So if every school in Chattanooga, every public school, had that many additional resources, maybe it would be better, but maybe not, because we just learned that an extra $1 million didn't necessarily.
Well, I mean.
Okay, I want to
Yeah.
chime in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
Please.
so my name is Reginald Smith, and I am in a former position. I was actually out there with Hamilton County Department of Education in the Innovation Zone, which received a $10.5 million grant
Yeah.
to go into the lowest performing schools in Hamilton County to help those schools out. Now, with that being said, it wasn't $1 million per school, but what we have to look at is that if we write a grant to do a specific thing, but yet, for whatever reasons, our hands are tied in executing that grant, then it wasn't that they received the money, because the money went into those schools for a specific task, and if you actually look and delve into the data, we actually did a great job of increasing the academic achievement of those students. Whether or not that impact is reflected in the news article is what I want to chime in on just a tad bit. Now, I was explaining to this gentleman right here, Mr. Harwell as well. We have a lot of great successes coming out of schools. I do agree exactly what you're saying, though. Our school systems across the country are designed for a lot of different purposes. In a lot of cases right now, we have a lot of students who are in that school to prison pipeline. But our school system is just in need of not just Hamilton County, but nationally, an even overhaul, because we teach students to do a specific thing, and that is to be a worker in a type of workforce that doesn't exist anymore. And we are still in the process of trying to catch up with innovation in every aspect of our community, but for whatever reason, we forget that the way that we taught students in 1922, the way we taught them in 1967, is actually the exact same way we still teach them in 2016. My grandmother went to Booker T. Washington High School in Memphis, Tennessee. My father graduated from Whitehaven High School in Memphis, Tennessee. I went to Ridgeway High School in Memphis, Tennessee. I can sit there and have a conversation with them about the exact same things and the exact same methodology that was used to educate them. They're educators. I'm an educator. We were all trained the exact same way to do the exact same thing. Well, there is no other institution in this entire country that does it the exact same way we've been doing it for so long. So just to go back to the point about, as far as education-wise, we really have to look at why we educate students. Are we truly trying to be the most educated country in the world? Are we really trying to make sure that every child has the opportunity to do better than the last generation? Or are we really trying to get to a point to where, we need X number of doctors, X number of lawyers. Some children are gonna make it, some children are not gonna make it. And those that are here, that's gonna be our McDonald's workers. Those are gonna be the people that we can continue to feed the criminal justice system with. Those are the people that we're gonna be able to do, all these other things while our elite children may have an opportunity to actually run the country. And so, I just want to reframe that narrative back in, because we have great Hamilton County teachers and educators who are working hard, but if the system is not designed in such a way that will allow them to do what they truly have a passion to do, and if there are roadblocks thrown in front of them because of the procedural method, saying, well, we would prefer to hire teachers from inside of Chattanooga, when I really need teachers from Detroit who've been working in very, very hardcore schools, but have an understanding of the demographic of kids that we need to have taught. Stop stopping me from hiring those people because they're not homegrown. No disrespect to UTC, I'm a double alumni of UTC, but our education program here is very, very great. It's not necessarily designed to go into an urban inner city school to teach a child at Howard High School. Now, there are great teachers that come out of UTC that do just that, but there are other universities across the country that specialize in that particular thing. I don't go to a dermatologist to fix a brain tumor. And so I'm saying that as Hamilton County, we have to really start to really think at how we do that. So I'll be quiet for the time.
Well, if we can't place our student teachers in those inner city schools to get that experience, that's a problem, because that is something. I absolutely agree.
Yeah, I know you already had conversations
we
about
have
this.
to deal with this. We have a new director of our teacher education program coming in, 6 vacancies. We're going to reinvent that program. We have to focus on solving this issue here. I mean, education's come up. I think it's so important. It is our future.
Yeah, and I think that as a society, even now, I guess this is my field of study. I love this type of stuff. But even as a society, in terms of what we do with our children, I keep hearing we have a gang problem in Chattanooga, we have this and we have that. I think we have an issue with children not having anything positive to be a part of. My organization is doing a lot to work with children. His organization is doing a lot to work with children. That's only a small percentage of all the children who get off the bus at 4 o'clock and have absolutely nothing to do. And so to your point about reinventing how we actually teach our teachers to teach, well, we also have to look at what are we doing to really invest in this next generation. Because everybody in this room, we went through our educational programs, we're out working every single day, but the true investment has to be this next generation that's coming behind us. We can't worry about creating brand new riverfront so that we can go running every day because it looks cool for us. Because the vast majority of the students that we are serving, they don't have access to that to begin with. A lot of children do, and that's great. But if we really want our society to be a great city, if we want our city to be a great city and our society to be thriving, then we have to make sure we invest in the very people who are going to build that in the future.
Yeah, there was a question back here.
Oh, yes, I'm Charlotte Williams. I wanted to piggyback on the educational system and stating that when we're looking at teachers as well as those that are involved in our children, we have to understand what their teaching philosophy will be. And what I mean by that, we have to see what type of curriculum that they want to bring to the classroom. Because so often the curriculum itself is not student-centered. It is not centered because all students do not learn the same way. And so you're going to have teachers that are going to be flexible in those classrooms and able to assist those students, as well as those that we're trying to impact. We need to have them at the table. A lot of times we come up with our own curriculum without the persons that we're trying to impact having some type of influence. And so we're just continuing to reinvent the wheel. and continue to throw money to something that is not going to be effective or productive. Yes.
And there's an extension too, though, in terms of the school kind of jail cycle that Irene mentioned, and I did not know, is that I guess inmates right now in the Hamilton County Jail are not allowed to have books. Did anybody else not know that?
So I could be an inmate in prison,
Yeah.
and I can work in prison for IBM and AT&T and corporations for cheap labor. But when I get out and I've got a felony, I can't go to work for that same IBM or that same AT&T or those same corporations now that benefited from my labor when I was incarcerated. So what type of value system do we have? It goes back to what you said about greed. You know, it goes back to the lust for power. You know, it's a different type of slavery. You know, because the 13th Amendment abolished slavery, but it did not abolish it if you were duly convicted of a crime. So if you're duly convicted of a crime, then you now can become a slave, and the new slave system is the prison industrial complex.
Okay, I've had these conversations before. Reggie is one of my best friends in the world, so we've been doing this off and on for about 10 years now. Our institutions, especially when it comes down to our schools, are reflections of our society, not exceptions to them. I think that that's first what we have to understand, is that whatever issues are going on in our communities are going to be reflected within our public school system. So if we have segregation in our community, we're going to have segregation in our school system. If we have poverty in our community, we're going to have poverty in our school system. If we have crime in our community, we're going to have crime and behavioral issues within our schools. So with Chattanooga, one of the unique things about Chattanooga is I can turn this corner and I can be in a really, really great part of the neighborhood, or turn one block over and be in a really, really horrible neighborhood. And when people talk about, I don't want my children to go to that school, no, it's not that school, it's your school. You're only one block over from that community. You should have the same interest whether your children go there or not, because ultimately, these are the people that you live next door to, these are the people that your kids are gonna play with. And if we're gonna continue to think about how we invest in those institutions, those schools, those prisons, our businesses as entrepreneurs, we have to take a real interest in what our neighbors are doing and have each other's back. That's something that's really problematic here when you talk about that control and power, is if I don't want you around, if I want to keep you out, I can. And that goes both ways. Now for minority groups, for low-income groups, a lot of times, I know it's been my experience here, that there is a desire to see schools improve. You have working parents who are doing 2-3 jobs, who are working night shifts, who do want to commit to the magnet schools and to the charter schools, who require X amount of hours of community service from the parents within the school system, and they simply can't take off work. And that's the issue. So if we have things within our school system that are working, we should be looking at what's working, and let's do that again and again and again, instead of saying, okay, well, this school, isn't performing. Well, this school is performing. So what is this school doing that we can put here? And we need to have that equity within our school systems and within our institutions as a whole, as opposed to that greed, that me, my program is going to try to compete with your program.
In the interest of time, because all of you have a schedule, I want to say that the level of wisdom that is being uttered here exceeds even my best dream. It's incredible what I'm hearing, and I'm glad we're getting it recorded in some fashion. There's no need to go to the last 2 questions because they're both being answered all over the place. So if we could simply go through the panel one more time in some kind of final thoughts as a result, and then for anybody in the audience who wants to add or question or continue that conversation, we have about 10 minutes, 8 or 9 minutes until we need to wind it up. So we'll start, we just heard from you. So let's start in the middle.
She was convicting your point. So what I'd like to do now, I'm sorry, my task, Jim?
question three?
No, just your summary, just how would you summarize all of this? You can respond to a question, something on your notes, but we've already been covering all three questions, so it's hard to just focus on one.
Sure. Well, I would just come back to the way that these values, whatever they are maintained. And it's fascinating that this has all come down to education. Warren Buffett, who is not a big hero of mine, but he does cast a long shadow, I guess, says if you want to fix public education in this country, get rid of private education. And I think that was this legacy school system that we have that goes unquestioned. My grandfather went to Baylor, my dad went to Baylor, I'm going to go to Baylor, my kids are going to go to Baylor. How do we break into that system? How do we shake that up, I guess? I think several of us at our table, when we wrote down on our cards, before we even asked a question, we're asked, before we even started talking about any of this stuff, we all ask a similar question to that. So it's fascinating that this has been the trajectory of today. I'm happy to be a part of it.
Good, thank you.
I'm happy to follow up on Warren Buffett, because one of the things.
He's not a hero. We will know that.
So Warren Buffett's son, whose name I think is Paul, and Warren Buffett both are noted philanthropists, but Paul has written an article recently on the problem with philanthropy. I think philanthropy is wonderful, I think generosity is a great thing, but the problem with philanthropy is it doesn't ask us to change the structures that are creating the conditions of inequality in the first place. So it's great that we have a community here in Chattanooga that is incredibly giving. We have many people who have benefited from wealth that has been built up since the Reconstruction, and they do give back to our cities, but what that doesn't do is it solves the immediate problem, but it doesn't actually change the structures that are creating the inequality of wealth that is creating the crisis in the first place. So I think what we need to be thinking about when we're interrogating these problems is not, and don't get me wrong, I value nonprofits, I value community service, but it seems to be, and people like Warren Buffett have been addressing this, is nonprofit is the largest growth industry in our country today, more than any other sector of business. And what that creates is as soon as you create new institutions that are responsible for giving away the money, there are more people who are getting paid and profiting off
The problem.
the problem. So that's one thing I think we need to be thinking about. And what it does is it preserves the status quo that's creating the inequality. Okay, there's my response to Warren Buffett.
Go down here.
Yeah, so I would kind of like to piggyback both off of that and DeMarcus, actually, in terms of that, the statement about education as being the reflection, because that's exactly right. And I mean, even, so we talked about the Signal Mountain schools that exist in the same Hamilton County Department of Education and exist with all those same kind of systems in place, but somehow they churn out, successful people. But so much of it is the fact that that's an expression of the physical structure that those students are coming from and the societal structure, right? And that is and this goes back to our comment about silos, that is completely separate from the rest of these neighborhoods. And they can live, and I say we, right? Because, I just moved from downtown to the side of Signal because I can afford to do that. And I did that because of our kids and because I want them to have the best education, but I can't afford private schools, right? So that affordability, and this goes back to the structures and to affordability of housing, is what allowed me to do that. But what does not allow the people that live in Eastlake to move to Signal Mountain, right? So I think that the structure, and this, I guess, it kind of comes down to me being an architect, right? So I do go back to that physical built environment that, we think of as kind of a result of society, but often is the cause of a lot of these things. If you can't afford to have the choice of where you live and what school you send your kids to because of this housing affordability issue, then this is what you've got, right? And because the people that live on Lookout and the people that live on Signal don't have to go through Eastlake, right? They don't see that. They don't send their kids there. This goes back to, getting rid of private schools in terms of, in theory, making everybody have the same schools. wouldn't solve necessarily that problem without,
Yeah.
well, no, but without actually putting the people, you know, getting the diversity in those neighborhoods and allowing people the choice to live where they want and send their kids to that school is, you know, a fundamental underlying issue.
I just want, can I piggyback on
Yeah.
that? Of course, I didn't notice something. There are some best practices in place for kind of merging what you all talk about. I don't ever think we're ever gonna get rid of in this country, the concept of like private schools and public schools. But there are places, there are a couple of districts in Texas that experimented with this, and in California, to where you have only magnet schools in the city. Every school has a specific theme, and every year, I think that in certain checkpoint years, you can apply to go to that school. But you have to go to a school by law. So figure out what best suits your children. And then the entire city's bought into this, the counties are bought into this, and they figure out the actual transportation mechanism to get children to the school of their choice. By doing that, you accomplish something that busing, I think everybody in agreement, did not act in the way that, we think things should look because of that. But what you end up with is an actual economic mix of people based off of, hey, I have an interest in allied health, opposed to what we have at East Lake Academy, which is a zone magnet school. If you look at the data coming out of that urban inner city school, they're outperforming some of the other schools in Hamilton County just because it's a zone magnet. Some of the people that are from that, in that school live in that area. A lot of people choose to go there because some of the magnet programs that are taking place there. I actually had the privilege of serving in that school and trying to actually recruit children from all across the district. Why? Because we know that mix of students from multiple different demographics, but primarily financially, will make the most impact in the academics of all the children. Because I can see something in that in my peer that is a little bit different than me, but you know what, I'm interested in, trying to be more like that. That's, just one particular job here. But having something like that would almost make every school in Hamilton County almost a private school. You have to apply to get into that school, and you have the 1 or 2 or 3 different choices that you have, and you go through the process of applying and go through a lottery, however that's set up. But then every school has to be at that level, opposed to, this school here in this particular area is under, is underperforming. Because at that point, it's underperforming because of what we're teaching, not necessarily the students that we're teaching. It changes the narrative of the story. I think a lot of what we're doing with values.
I'm sorry, question back here.
No, I just want to mention something here, and I don't know if I can articulate this very well. I looked at schools and academic achievement from 2014 to 2015, and 2 of the elementary schools that have the highest level of academic achievement are considered those that are among the worst. That's Hardy School and Rivermont Elementary. And now, I don't know what's happening there. I'm hearing stuff. Some of it's parent involvement, what the community is doing for their school. I don't, and maybe this is.
And you're talking about growth, right? Not straight achievement, just growth.
I'm talking about achievement in reading proficiency for the elementary schools. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, growth from one year to another.
Relative.
Yes.
Yes.
Rivermont Elementary increase of 16.9% of children reading proficiently. I can almost cry when I forget what it is, Hardy. But this is stupid cliche, power of the people. It's like, I think maybe we don't have to move to single member. Maybe we can stake a claim, and say, I'm working in this school and I'm going to make it better for those kids. And this is another thing I put. I was at a meeting and it was around health and stuff, and I looked at the materials going to make health better, and it's all geared toward middle class, so it's almost like we're going to make it better. But what about people having trouble with literacy, So I'm all about building the community from within and not having to move places. I don't have little children, so maybe it's easy for me to say, but I get passionate about that people have power, and sometimes we classify even the nonprofits as those that receive and those that give, and we disempower, we break spirits, it's like that people can't do for themselves. We're doing sometimes more harm than good. And I think I'll leave it with that, but I got a passion for those 2 little schools. And the principal of that school didn't even know that they had increased that much over time. That's a cause for celebration, and I'll just leave it at that.
May I mention something real quick about Hardy School? Several years back, and this is a continuation of several years back, I was the PTO president at Hardy. I had sons who attended Hardy. And by the way, Hardy was not my zone school, because I don't believe in you telling me where I have to take my children to school at, because I live in a certain area. So we did not live in the Hardy area, but we chose to take our children there because we could get them there, and there's no way you can tell me otherwise. The principal at Hardy School was named Natalie Elder. She was the principal there. I was her PTO president. What we did is that we put a curriculum together, going back here, we put a curriculum together that was designed for the black students of that school. We went year-round. We went uniform. We had every teacher who did not want to be there. We asked them, do you want to be here? Or were you assigned here? Every teacher that was assigned there that did not want to be there, we got them transferred out of that school. And we got teachers there who wanted to be there. At the time, Hardy was the worst performing school in the system and perhaps the state. Within 1 year's time, we were the best performing school in all of Tennessee in 1 year's time, because the parents bought in, the principals and the teachers bought in, and we were a very strong PTO, and we did not allow the superintendent of the school board to run what we did in that school. So Hardy is a continuation of something that started back some time ago. My sons have gone on to graduate now from high school, but that is a system that started some time ago. And by the way, I am a Baylor graduate, so that I just wanted to throw that.
This is all so exciting.
I love the neighborhood that I live in, and I refuse to move from the neighborhood that I live in to go somewhere that has a better school. I feel that my children benefit from going to school with people that live in the same neighborhood as us. We go to a zone magnet school, we're not zone 4, but it's very near our house. My dream is really to get a coalition of parents together that are willing to all submerge their kids into these schools that need help and just invest, together. Because moving is a disinvestment. Moving is taking your resources out of a community that needs your resources. So I get very passionate actually about that too. And so, I want my son to go to Howard. I do. So I've started building relationships with the staff at Howard, and I will start building relationships with the students there and begin the process of becoming a part of the Howard family well before my kid's in kindergarten right now, well before he steps foot in the door as a freshman. But this goes back, I think, to that rugged individualism thing about Chattanooga and really what is at the center and heart of our values. It's very easy to think about ourselves and the needs of our families and the needs of our children and the needs of maybe our immediate neighbors. But beyond that, it's kind of hard to think about, especially when you're not interacting with people on a day-to-day basis. So I guess I wish that would change. That's one thing about Chattanooga that I wish would change, that people would be more empathic and compassionate and considerate of the people outside of their immediate geographic area or outside of their nuclear family. Just think about the broader picture of what this means for the city, what this means for the county, what this means for the district, what this means for the state.
Thank you.
It can get away from you. Normal.
You're feeling me right now.
I am. I've got the empathy thing going, but it can get away from you. In terms of schools, because Normal Park did it, and then it got away from them, and then people started moving in there to be a part of that.
Well, we got 2 more people and we're out of time, so.
Well, I'll be quick.
Okay.
So something I think that's like really important when we discuss this kind of stuff and like moving forward, when we're like with nonprofits and how we're going to come into schools and this kind of thing of like embracing the idea of like it's like solidarity versus charity, right? And so it's like, are we here to fix a problem for somebody, or are we here to fix a problem with somebody? And like that's something that we see within Chattanooga quite a lot. Is that like we have these charades, we have neighborhood associations, we have committees that are set up that aren't really accessible, and so all these mechanisms that are already even in place to kind of help fix these problems or address these issues or work through them are very rarely representative. One, and even if they are, it's like it's pretty impossible to access them for some people. And so making sure that like as we check off these things and work within like public education, because that's what we've been talking to, like as we go through and try to fix these problems, are we like correctly reaching everybody that has a stake in the game? Are we reaching the single mom that's working 2 jobs and probably isn't going to come to a meeting on Thursday night at 6 p.m. because she's tired and she's got kids to feed? Like how are we reaching those voices and like really viewing the work that we're doing and pushing these values to that idea of like we're here to fix this problem with each other rather than for somebody. Like we're not, and I think like nonprofits in particular like tend to get that attitude of like we're here to fix something, like the Savior complex of coming in and doing that, rather than like investing in the communities and setting up relationships in the communities and actually like providing the communities the resources that they need to fix the problems on their own as communities see necessary. So like that's always like something that's pretty important for me, and like came up within what we were saying of like are we kind of going through like the charade of like having this participation, or are we actually doing the participation in a meaningful way?
Thank you.
All right, so overall, I think the thing has been community empowerment rather than charity for social and cultural and economic underclasses. So with that, something that I think that's very, very important for us to take away is that one of our roles, especially having this kind of elite conversation on a college campus about these types of issues, is that the role is to have authentic engagement and learning opportunities with these communities from a position that doesn't already put the condition of I have to be comfortable with what you have to say or what you plan on teaching me. That gets away from a lot of us sometimes, I think, and we can have these really high-minded conversations. So even with the example earlier that kind of got started before we even kind of talked about some of these things, was about who gets to define what Southside even is. You know, the newcomers who are coming in and building those neighborhoods, or the people who that's been their location, that's been where they've worked, that's been where they were living already. Who gets to do that before we even start? That and how we have that conversation, the words that we use, and what we choose to say or not say for that matter, has a lot to do with the power that we hold. So if we're really going to empower these communities, we have to have an authentic conversation that lets people, and that lets people in those positions learn, number one, and the people that we're trying to serve have a fair and equal and equitable seat at the table to have their voices heard. And with our education system, that's definitely one of the things that's important, because I think that if you're actually in some of these schools that we talk about and you actually see what's going on, the kids see, even if they're unable to articulate what's going on, even if they don't necessarily understand how everything works and how everything interrelates, they see it and they understand how they feel. And when kids that I work with at Howard and at Brainerd, at Hardy, when we're talking about some of these issues and what's going on, they understand that there's a difference between Signal Mountain. They understand that there's a difference between Ottawa and some of these other schools in Baylor and McKee. And they internalize those things. They try to figure out what's wrong with me, what's wrong with my school. And honestly, a lot of the behavior issues that I have from the kids that I work with have everything to do with not being able to understand and articulate what's going on with the communities that they see. They see the stratification, they see the segregation, and because it's what they have, they become territorial with it because it's all that they have. And understanding that dynamic going into the community in the first place has the ability to change the entire dynamic. That's why it's important to have those teachers in schools who are well versed and educated not only on the newest and latest pedagogy of teaching, but also what community these kids are coming from. who are the people that are important to your life? Your mom and your dad may not be the people who have the influence. It may be your brother or your sister or your auntie or your neighbor down the street or whoever's taking care of you in that community. So we have to be conscious of that when we're having these conversations and when we're really trying to help, because otherwise we do just what we've been saying that we shouldn't, and that's we throw money at a situation and we feel good about it, but we don't actually change the structures and the power dynamics that create these problems in the first place.
Thank you so much. Let's give the panel a hand. I couldn't have imagined a better summary. And now, your ticket out the door. Thank you. I can't, I'll try online to tell you how thankful I am for y'all being here, but I know we're over time. Your ticket out the door is a sheet of paper at your seating place where you answer 2 questions. One is, what's the most important thing I learned today? And 2 is, what question do I still have that needs to be answered? And then you can go.